and today we'll explore how community stories can lead to stronger public dialogue, institutional learning, and lasting collaboration. Before we begin, just a few more housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll send the recording and any additional resources to everyone who registered. Throughout the session, please use the Q&A to introduce yourself if you would like, to respond to prompts and ask questions. I will be doing my best to just kind of insert those questions into the flow while Delaney and Liza are presenting. And want to let you know just the two experts who are joining us today. Liza Gross, who's a journalist and media leader with more than 3 decades of experience. And Delaney Butler is the Assistant Director of the Collaborative Journalism Resource Hub, and she oversees the collaborative projects and connects journalists with resources and support. And if you would both like to give yourself a one-line introduction, feel free to mention something about yourself too. I just don't want to take up too much time choosing your words for you there. So I'm going to invite Delaney and Liza in. I'm going to disappear for a little while, but I'll be here at the Q&A if you need me.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. And I think we're going to get started with our slides. I'm really excited to hand it over to Liza for a little bit about us.
Thank you very much, Delaney. Thank you all for being here, joining us today. And thank you, Jack, for organizing this. The Collaborative Journalism Resource Hub is firmly rooted in journalism. However, we do believe that there are many, many ways to tell stories and to tell them in many, many forms and presentations, not just in your traditional, what we used to think of as traditional journalism. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how to amplify and lift up the journalistic message in a variety of ways that don't involve only print, radio, or broadcast. So if you can go to the next slide, Delaney. So the hub was established in 2025 at the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University in Montclair, New Jersey. But our history goes much further back than that. The hub is the successor of the Local Media Project, which started in 2016. Delaney and I were there at inception. And that's when our work with collaboration started. And the idea that a group of news organizations and adjacent organizations adjacent to news and that manage information are stronger if they come together to tell the stories of a community. So many of the collaboratives, almost all of the collaboratives that we built up through the Local Media Project are still very active throughout the country. And now through the hub, we are working with a new set of collaborations, again, throughout the country. So we work both with aspiring collaboratives, notional collaboratives, nascent collaboratives, and our established collaboratives. And they have actually exceeded our expectations by creating their own networks and their own ways of communicating with each other without the need for us to intervene. So our mission is to advance the field of collaborative journalism in the US in the firm belief that when several news organizations and adjacent organizations get together to tell the stories of a community or to address challenges of a community, that topic is much better reported. The reporting is much richer, much more excellent, and it leads to the community making better decisions about itself. So if we can go to the next slide. So here is how we define collaboration. Collaboration exists in the United States and globally in a variety of forms, from the simple content exchange. This organization says, I'll write a story and I'll let you have it, and you write a story and you let me have it. But we want to go much further than that. We are looking for an attitudinal change. We're looking for an experience where All sectors of the community are engaged with the news. So this is how we define collaboration. It's a formal agreement between a group of news organizations and other entities, like a library, like a university, like a data center, not an AI data center, but a data center, working together with a long-term strategy for the purpose of better informing and engaging the community they serve. These news organizations span platforms, sizes, and models. They are representative of the community they serve. We have big legacy newsrooms in our collaboratives. We have ethnic media. We have LGBTQ publications. Non-news partners may include educational institutions, arts groups, student journalists, subject matter experts, data scientists, and much more. Next. So the way we organize this, it's a formal agreement. We don't believe in occasionally we'll meet and occasionally we'll discuss this issue or that issue. We really believe in making a concerted effort to get organized and to devise a strategy. The collaborative works out of a central pool of funding. In other words, everybody gets to decide how whatever funding the collaborative has will be spent. The partners agree together on how to use the funding. Everybody has an equal weight. Not necessarily your best resourced participants in a collaborative are the most valuable. You may have a very under-resourced or small organization that is pivotal to the subject matter that the collaborative has chosen. Funding is used for work that is available to and benefits the collaborative and partners, and continued fundraising for the sustainability of our collaboratives. One big point that we always like to make is that we want to turn our collaboratives into permanent fixtures of the local media landscape. And for that, it's not a matter only of generating excellent journalism and engaging your audience, but you also need to be financially sustainable. And so we work with our collaboratives to think up and draw and execute strategies that will achieve that goal. Next. So here is more or less how the process works. We encourage our collaboratives to choose a topic based on the gaps and needs of their community. Some examples of the topics chosen by our collaboratives: affordable housing, caregiving of elders. The collaborative in Salt Lake, not surprisingly, has chosen the drying up of the Great Salt Lake. So it has to be a topic that is top of mind for the community and that it has been perceived as urgent and typically not resolved. It continues to be a challenge. Setting clear expectations for participation is key. We spend a lot of time in the prep work before we even go out and start reporting on the topic. We design clear processes and protocols for interaction. How are you going to talk to each other? How are you going to, what are you going to do and process? How are you going to process the material you have, whether it's stories, text, or whether it's videos or podcasts or whatever it is that the collaborative produces. We want to ensure a diversity of representation in the collaborative. I would say 100% of our collaboratives have ethnic media representation. LGBTQ representation is very frequent. We have many collaboratives that have as a partner an academic institution. And in fact, in one of our active collaboratives now, an academic institution leads and anchors the collaborative, and that's the Kaplan School of Communications at Florida International University. And very importantly, you develop your impact and your metric strategy from the start. This is not an afterthought. This is not something you think about once you have a body of work that you have created together. You have to think about this at the beginning. It's like learning to play the piano with both hands as opposed to playing the piano with only one hand. You need to think about what is it that you want to change with your reporting? Do you want to raise awareness of a topic? Do you want to bring about attitudinal change? Do you want regulations put in place? Do you want to shed light on underreported aspects of this issue? Whatever it is that you want to do, you need to think through it at the beginning as you sketch out your your editorial strategy. Excuse me. And then alongside all this, you also have to build your business strategy for long-term sustainability. Once you are done with this topic, or you may want to continue with this topic for several years. Charlotte, for example, continued with the topic of affordable housing for at least 3 or 4 years. Now they've kind of deviated a little bit. Our collaboratives spend about a year in their topic and then pivot onto something adjacent generally, but not necessarily the same topic. Philadelphia, that has been now in existence for over 10 years, has had 3 main topics that they have worked through, all of them connected to each other, but different. So you may choose to stay with a topic or you may pivot. That's up to you, up to what you see in terms of the community engagement. So why collaborate? Well, we all know, and I don't know if our our audience here, it's all journalists or not all journalists, but everybody knows that the news business is going through some turbulent waters that have been, caused by changes in the habits in the audience's news consumption habits, but also in the decline of our traditional business models because of the technological changes. What made newspapers very profitable 25 or 30 years ago no longer applies. And so really we must think about different ways, different forms of creating news organizations and different ways to sustain them. And that is still an open question. We have not found the specific recipe that will bring sustainability to journalism or to the journalism industry, but we do know that collaboration is one tool. We need to bring all weapons to this fight. So in the last 20 years, here is some specifics about the dire panorama we encounter. Almost 40% of all local newspapers in the United States have closed, leaving 50 million Americans with limited or no access to a reliable news source of local news. I'm not talking about here about the networks. 222 US counties have no local news source. The panorama sounds very dire, but we're also very encouraged because we're seeing a number of experiments cropping up here and there that will take time, but hopefully will be able to flourish and recreate a sustained and robust media landscape. Informed and engaged citizens, we believe this very strongly. Not to copy the Knight Foundation, but we do believe that exactly. Informed and engaged citizens are essential for democracy and the proper function of a community. There's a number of studies that indicate that communities that have lost their local source, their local news source, so no longer have access to what's been happening in the school board meetings, what's been happening in the zoning board meetings, are more apathetic to the news and cannot make decisions about what is good or what would be productive for their communities. Next. Well, here is a map that shows 2 or more outlets. One outlet, the darker blue, is 2 or more outlets, communities that have 2 or more outlets. The pale lilac is 1 outlet communities, and you see that there is a growing number of yellow communities that have 0 news outlets that they can call their own. And unfortunately, if we compare this map to previous years, the lilac and the yellow portions of the map have been grown. Next. So why collaborate? This is the path that we have chosen to support in terms of recreating a robust media ecosystem and restoring trust and faith in news. Collaboration gives participants greater reach. It amplifies their message. It provides the opportunity to serve communities previously underserved or to serve communities that are served, that have been well served in different and more robust ways. It takes advantage of multiple channels for sharing stories. It's not only print, radio, but it's also podcast, it's also video, it's also social networks like it's TikTok, it's Instagram, and we will see this a little bit later in the presentation. It's more unorthodox manifestations like theater plays or songs. So we firmly believe that the journalistic message can be absolutely efficiently distributed through multiple channels, not just the few traditional ones. And it maximizes limited resources, supplements human power and specialized skills. When the COVID pandemic struck, our collaborative in New Hampshire did something that traditional news people would have thought unthinkable 20 years ago even, because they were, of course, very short-staffed and the staff was exhausted. The small publications would lend each other reporters. So if you worked for a news organization, you filled in a shift in another news organization that was short one person or needed that news person to rest for the day. So that is one way in which they were able to cope with the flow and maintain a good flow of information for their communities in New Hampshire. But, it doesn't need to be that extreme. You can maximize limited resources through your agreements as a collaborative. We are strong in podcasts. You don't need to invest in podcasts. We'll share those podcasts. You are strong in video. All right, we'll share the video with you and we'll give you this other thing. So that is a strong incentive. It's not only through getting funding, but also through sharing what you have. These are the news organizations, but now we also believe that civil society can play a very, very important role in a collaborative as advisors, as monitors, and even as collectors of information. Many of you have probably heard of documenters that trains citizens to attend school board meetings, zoning board meetings, and then bring that information back to the news organization. So we totally think about civil society as a vital player in collaborations. And it helps people access resources and understand what's going on in their community, because as civil society gets more involved in the generation of information, they also become better informed in the process. So here I'm going to turn it over to Delaney to talk about our collaborative in Wilmington and coastal journalism.
Yeah, thanks so much, Liza. Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk a little bit about just how we got connected with the folks in Wilmington, how we got connected with the Coastal Journalism Hub initially. I met Nick at the Collaborative Journalism Summit, which was our annual summit organized by the Center for Cooperative Media. So that brings together everyone who's interested in this from all over the country. And one of the first things that Nick and I talked about was that there was just a willingness, right? There was a sense that it was kind of time to do this in Wilmington. That's always really what we're looking for, right? Like that willingness to try something new. It is very hard to get started without that. So that's definitely one of those things we're really looking for early on. The other thing that we saw in Wilmington right away was a diversity of partners. And Liza even mentioned this in the beginning. Beyond just a diversity of partners, what we're looking for is a group of partners that is representative of the community, right? We want these collaboratives to look like the places that they are reporting on, to represent the places that they are working in. Unique civic and community partnerships, we definitely saw this early on. In Wilmington, Liza touched on, bringing in those non-news partners. And we definitely saw that early on here with the willingness to bring in not just community health folks due to the topic, which we'll get into in just a second, but also a willingness to bring in folks from, the arts community, folks from storytelling organizations, and folks from other kinds of civic and community organizations. That was really, really clear early on. This willingness to move beyond competition. Now, we do tell collaboratives, you don't have to stop competing necessarily. You do have to move, like we say, you do have to move beyond that a little bit, right? You have to move into a different mindset, moving into this collaborative mindset, beyond this sort of mindset of, I'm on my own and I'm the only one who can, I'm the only one who can solve this. I'm the only one who can do this, right? There was this sense in Wilmington that folks were ready to think about this a different way, right? To think about working together rather than just sort of struggling in their own silos. And then an urgent reporting topic. So from the beginning, when I talked to the folks in Wilmington, public and community health came up a lot, just partially due to just some on the ground changes, right? Just some local level changes that folks are really plugged into around policy changes or just things going on in New Hanover County and North Carolina more broadly. Before folks really landed on that 17-year life expectancy gap, right? Which I'm sure those of you who have been in the other sessions have heard about. So from the beginning, there was a real consensus, right, around a few of these urgent reporting topics. And one of my favorite memories too is going down to Wilmington and doing the exercise where we sort of landed on that topic and getting to hear what everyone was looking at and what everyone was excited about, and getting to just really sit with the group and see how many ideas there were, right, about these different topics in the community. A couple other things that just to, kind of point out that we've seen in Wilmington, there are really, really strong relationships. We do these projects all over the country. Liza and I have been doing this a long time. We've worked with a lot of different groups. Absolutely a strength here in Wilmington is that the relationships between partners are really strong, really, really, deep and interesting. Folks have worked with each other on different things. Folks have worked together, not just on journalism, but just on other things in the community. Folks are really, excited to work together. Folks really want to come together and do something new, something bigger. Also early on, what we saw, this is something we're also always looking for. We had a strong convener in Nick, right? So we call people like Nick our convener because they have the relationships and they're the experts in who's in the room and who's in the community, right? We always tell people, you're all the experts in your communities. We're the experts in, best practices for these projects, but you all are the experts in, who's in the room, who is in your community, who needs to be at the table. So we had a really great convener in Nick because he is, really, really well networked, really, really, deeply knowledgeable about this community. And he helped us identify Suzanne, or the project manager, also early on. So we had a strong sort of, central presence, right? It's kind of a strong way for folks to be organized around a central goal. Really things we like to see early on. And of course, Wilmington has had some really great early impact. It has flown by, but it's really only been a year since I went down to Wilmington, for the kickoff meeting last June. And since then, they've had some really, really exciting fundraising wins with, particularly with local funding. done some really great events, including this series. And we've also just seen really, really good habits around information sharing. I've been really impressed to see, the way that this group shares not just kind of like day-to-day information with each other, but I really want to just highlight, some of the conversations that I've seen in this group where, everyone's going to the same festival this weekend, right? So someone says, hey, I think we're all going to this same festival this weekend anyway. Like, why don't we join forces, right? Why don't we do something all together? We're all going to be there anyway. So I've just been really impressed by, seeing how folks are so willing to share their information, which really becomes, right, resource sharing in this group. And then I'm going to turn it back to Liza for a little bit to talk a little bit about impact and success.
Yes, just as Delaney mentioned in Wilmington, all the great factors that make it possible, make for a collaborative, help a collaborative move forward, cannot be stressed enough. You have to be bold. You have to be ambitious in the right way. You have to reimagine your local media landscape. You can't just say, okay, yeah, let's get together and continue doing things the way we used to do them. Let's not explore, let's not risk, let's not experiment. And that is not going to work. You really need to take that risk, and then you'll see the results. It is work, but you will see the results. And here are some examples of our impact that you're probably already seeing in Wilmington, but of course, we have seen them in other places. This is a statement from Holly Edgell, managing editor of the Midwest Newsroom. And we really like this because she hits it on the nail. Collaboration is a superpower for journalism. It gives everyone involved the chance to learn and partner while expanding reporting capacity for the benefit of our audiences. And if we as journalists don't believe that and don't engage in that exercise, well, how do we expect our audiences to believe it? So we need to be the first converts, and we need to be the first ones to the reach to really imagine or reimagine new ways of doing journalism. Next. Here is also the money part, which, as I mentioned, is absolutely essential for a collaborative to be able to move forward. In 2025, that's last year, we were able to see that 1.5 million was raised across all our 11 collaboratives. Local support, which is something that we are really bullish on. Sure, there's always the Knight Foundation, there's always the MacArthur Foundation, and that is great, but the engagement, the true support will come from your local area, from the folks that know you, that support your work, and that feel engaged with your work and understand the mission, and really are vested in the improvement of the community as a whole. Over our lifetime, the Local Media Project, our collaboratives, 20 of them, 16, pardon, 20 now with the hub, but our 16 collaboratives raised more than $12 million over a span of 5 years, true. But as I said, the overwhelming majority of them, except for 3, are still totally active in their communities and have managed to really affect that attitudinal change in the local landscape. Next. One thing that we always tell our collaboratives is we insist that the idea of solutions journalism be an animating force of the collaborative. Many of you in the audience are probably familiar with solutions journalism, but I will just refresh the concept. Solutions journalism is rigorous reporting that focuses on responses to social problems, investigating not just what is broken, but how and why people are trying to fix it. I mean, you can talk in your scene setter about what is broken. Our education system, housing that is unaffordable. How did we get here? Here are the reasons why. But then your reporting should focus on what is being done to address this issue. Some may be very successful, some initiatives, some may not be that successful, but solutions journalism is a type of journalism that looks forward, not backwards. It doesn't stay in the status quo. It doesn't give you the headline that tells you that what you already know, that housing is unaffordable or that your local school system is broken. Trust among collaborative members was built through the process of re-examining your reporting practices and assumptions in light of solutions journalism. One participant in a workshop that we gave, and this was not a collaborative, but we were very pleased when he said, I always remember this this quote. It was at the Huffington Post. He said, I just completed a series on cocaine abuse, and I would have done something completely different if I had known cocaine abuse in New York City. And I would have done something completely different if I had known about solutions journalism before I launched that series, which made us feel very, very good. So definitely look at, re-examine your processes. Don't be afraid to say, okay, sure. I mean, we've done it this way, but could we do it a different way? Could we focus on this instead of that? Could we focus on what's working? Could we take that further? Could we change the dialogue? Could we change the public narrative around this topic and what can be done about it? Every community has endemic challenges. Some of them are deemed unfixable. Some can be fixed partially only, but solutions journalism proposes that you focus on that instead of on the it's a problem and it can be solved, and sort of detail in eternum why this problem can't be solved. So all of our collaboratives have really embraced, both at the collaborative level and at the individual level, solutions journalism. And we feel that that has been for the good of the community they serve and for the good of journalism. Next. I'll let you take the Great Salt Lake Collaborative, Delaney.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Liza. And, and like Liza was saying, all of our collaboratives have embraced that solutions journalism mindset. And I think that's going to be obvious as we talk about some of these, interesting civic partnership examples. I think we're going to see a lot of exactly what Liza is saying, sort of this, shift in mindset to look at not just the things that we all know are wrong or challenging or difficult, but also what's being done. So, in Salt Lake City, like Liza mentioned earlier, our collaborative there looks at the Great Salt Lake. This is one of those issues. You can quite literally look outside your window and see that the lake continues to shrink and degrade, right? So this, as we always say, this is not really a big secret in that community. This is not really a scoop. No one is fighting for the scoop that the Great Salt Lake is drying. Everyone knows that. But there's this other angle, right, about what's being done about the lake. And so our collaborative there has done some really interesting artistic partnerships. One was a play about the shrinking Great Salt Lake. It was called Just Add Water. That was a partnership with a local theater troupe. There was also a partnership with a high school dance troupe called Submerge. And the dance was inspired by the journalism, right? So the performance was inspired by the reporting from the collaborative, and then that dance was performed, in the community. Lake Effect, this was a really interesting one. This was a series of audio stories about folks' relationship to the lake. So it was almost like an oral history project, right? Where you had people coming and talking about their memories of the lake, right? And preserving these stories from folks from different generations who have witnessed changes to the lake over time. And then they also there was also an anthology of essays and poems and art and photography about the lake, again, all based on the reporting. Our Charlotte Collaborative, this is one of our, most established, longest running collaboratives. Also happens to be, over on the other side of North Carolina from Wilmington. So we do end up talking about them a lot with this group. In 2020, they collaborated with a local art collective called Boom Charlotte to produce a graphic novel. And the graphic novel, contains stories, again, written by the collaborative, produced about sort of everyday citizens' lives during the spring of 2020. And they published a follow-up series called Echoes of a Pandemic. It was sort of a 5-year retrospective from these sort of first stories that were published that spring. They also have some physical copies of the graphic novel. I have a couple. I think Liza has one too. So I also have some of those, printed copies with that art in there. The Local News Impact Summit, this is something that the collaborative now does every year. This was an idea started, the project manager wanted to bring together the journalists and also residents to talk about, solutions to the housing crisis in Charlotte. Like we were talking about before, how these problems are not necessarily unknown, right? The problems themselves are fairly clear. The housing crisis in Charlotte was one of the first things this group ever talked to us about. They said this is like the persistent issue in their community. So the project manager of that collaborative had this idea to bring together citizens and journalists to talk about, what are the solutions to this, right? If people want to live here, what does it mean for folks to be making their home in Charlotte? Wells Fargo is a major sponsor of that event. And that event, now that it's annual, now that there's impact from it every year, it's easier and easier for the collaborative to get sponsorships and funding and attention for that event. So that's always an exciting one. And then Shifting Ground is a series that they've been working on for a while now, again, as they've continued to report more deeply on housing issues in Charlotte. They're also looking at, lived experiences and sort of that continued search for solutions. Too far. All right, our Granite State News Collaborative. This is one of our statewide collaboratives in New Hampshire. Liza, fact check me on this one, because I know you always say this. It's there are more people living in Philadelphia than in the entire state of New Hampshire. Is that correct? Okay, so one of our statewide collaboratives.
1.2 million versus 2 million.
2 million. Wow. So again, this is one of our really established long-running collaboratives. I think one of the collaboratives that we've been working with the longest. So about a year ago, the Granite State News Collaborative did an initiative called Know Your News. And the cool thing about Know Your News is that it was originally a regional campaign. It was about press freedom. It was tied to Constitution Day in New Hampshire, which regionally, locally, Constitution Day is a really big deal in New Hampshire, right? So this story kicked off on Constitution Day, reminding people about their press freedom, about open government, and about how these rights really do still play a role in our daily lives. There's also now a national version of Know Your News. So it was so successful regionally that the project manager said, I want to make this available nationally. So that was, kind of a unique recent civic partnership there. Granite State News Collaborative also runs a program called Civic Documenters that, again, trains community members to cover local government meetings and fill those coverage gaps. Our Wichita Journalism Collaborative, which we could do a whole other webinar on their journey. Wichita is one of our comeback story collaboratives. So this is a collaborative that took sort of a hiatus, after they launched, and then got back together, sort of refocused on their work together. A couple interesting things that they've worked on recently. One is this How to Talk About Feeling Bad. This is a resource guide for mental health. It was published in a couple different languages. This collaborative has been focused on mental health and sort of youth mental health specifically since they started. We also caught up with them recently to talk about an event they did called Priced Out. And this was after they were reporting on youth mental health for a while. They, like many of our collaboratives, realized that the essential issue in Wichita is housing. So they sort of switched over to looking at housing, did this big event called Priced Out, like we said, that was really a community gathering that had, music and games and also really honest and frank discussions about housing challenges in Wichita. This is one of our examples from 2020, 2021. This is our Northeast Ohio Collaborative out of Cleveland. And this was a project that they did around public records. So they did these interactive lessons through text message. So citizens could learn about public records and how to find them, right? This was something the collaborative identified as a real need. Folks didn't really know how to access these records. And, through the efforts of the collaborative setting up this kind of text message mini course, they were able to empower local citizens to take a more active role, especially during this time of civic changes in Cleveland. Resolve Philly, our sort of, first collaborative experiment way back when. Couple interesting things that they've worked on. One was called Zigzag. Zigzag was a series focused on different facets of economic mobility, right? So this was a series that looked at, whether it's housing, education, business, different things in a citizen's life, right, can make, an impact to their economic mobility. And then Power Up Reentry. This is one of our all-time favorite examples. I know it's one of Liza's favorite examples, so I'll let her add any other details that I forget. But this was a hackathon, right? So coders, journalists, and everyday people got together to sort of hack potential solutions for folks who were returning from incarceration. I see Liza unmuted.
Yes, I just wanted to say I am not seeing the slides, so you may have to take it from here to the end, but I can certainly add a little bit to what Philadelphia did. Philadelphia was an innovator in so many ways, and they did so many over the year and a half that they reported first the reentry project and then Broken Philly. They reported on these two topics. They did a variety of very innovative things. The hackathon was one of them. They had an art show. The work shown in City Hall was from returning citizens, folks that had been in prison and had completed their sentence, and they did artwork connected to that. They had panels. They had a sort of an area where citizens could go and tell their stories of reentry, or someone connected to someone who had undergone reentry. So they had a multiplicity of activities to engage citizens throughout the years. And in their closing event, it was standing room only. More than they exceeded the capacity of the hall where they were, and the closing event was attended by the governor and the mayor. So that's how much impact the reentry project had in Philadelphia.
Yeah, amazing. Always appreciate. Liza was really involved early on in that Resolve Collaborative, so I always rely on her for those early anecdotes. And we are almost done with the slides, and then I'm looking forward to turning it over to questions. Really quick, just touching on our Dallas Media Collaborative. Briefly, they worked on a project called Misled. And this was a mixed media performance tied to the West Dallas neighborhood and their fight for environmental justice. And we have this quote from Carrie Mitchell, who was the convener there for that collaborative. She's with the Dallas Free Press. I always love this one, when she talks about looking at things in a multidisciplinary way. Could this be journalism? That's not for me to answer. It's for the audience to answer, but it could be. Why not? So I always love thinking about that way. Then just some really quick impacts to wrap us up from, sort of our three longest running collaboratives. Our Granite State Collaborative, their race and equity project led to the creation of advisory councils with citizens with lived experience who could weigh in on the project's direction and output. So those are really exciting milestone once we had a collaborative, that had been able to set up those advisory councils in that way. In Charlotte, after they produced the graphic novel that we talked about, they organized an event where folks could come and create their own. So they did that virtually. And then in Philadelphia, they had an initiative called Equally Informed, and that was a two-way texting service, right? So we've talked a little bit about these kinds of text courses and ways of engaging folks through text messages. They did a free two-way texting service, both in English and Spanish, with news updates. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see folks. And then, Jack, I will look to you to walk us through some questions.
Yeah, great. Thank you all so much. That's very interesting stuff. Let me just get my questions here and make sure I can see everybody. All right, here's a good one. Could you talk about doing journalism hubs in rural areas? And are there special considerations for the types of partnerships that may work well in rural areas?
The factors that make a collaborative successful have nothing to do with their location, whether they are in rural areas or whether they are in urban areas. It has to do with the willingness of the participants to come together, all of those topics that we talked about. If you really don't want to be there, then it's not going to work. However, rural areas face some additional obstacles in terms of making the collaborative successful, the distances, the lack of density. It makes it more difficult to execute audience engagement activities. It makes it a little bit more challenging to distribute information. So it boils down to then how a collaborative thinks creatively about how to overcome some of these, accept some of the limitations, and really doubles down on whatever works. But there is no reason why a collaborative in a rural area should not succeed.
Thank you so much, Liza. Bringing up this next question that just popped up, which is, in cases where a collaborative became permanent, what common factors led to success?
I will let Delaney elaborate a little bit after, but all that we have been saying throughout the webinar, really believing in each other, building trust among partners. We know that in local media collaboratives, everybody has known each other for years. I know my colleague who works at that radio station. I know several colleagues that work in the network affiliate TV, but we're not talking about knowing them. We're talking about being able to place your trust to be able to create something new and reimagine a better option for journalism in your community. And that doesn't always translate. I will not identify it, but I will talk about a collaborative that did not work out. And it started with high hopes, with a robust number of interested parties. I mean, we had over 15 outlets at that table for the preliminary conversations. But over the months, they were really unable to think differently about how they thought about each other and how they thought about working together. They were unable to work together. They engaged in unproductive discussions, and it just fizzled out. And it was very sad, no matter what we tried. We tried this, we tried that. They just were unable to create that situation of trust. And that situation of trust comes from not only the willingness to be there, but the willingness to be open and to very, very clearly state how you're going to work together, transparency, and be willing to, sometimes you don't get what you want. Sometimes you really accept this. I'll give a couple of examples where, there some difficult situations were created that were successfully navigated. I will not identify the collaboratives, but in one collaborative, we had a participant that very openly, this person worked for the legacy media in that city, and very openly stated that there were concerns in this legacy media outlet about the quality of journalism that was practiced by some of the ethnic media outlets that wanted to join the collaborative. And that was hashed out. That was put on the table. There were some intense discussions, and it was worked out how they were going to be able to move forward. The other one was, for example, when some participants in a collaborative are behind a paywall and cannot share their material freely, or there are problems with sharing their material freely, or when collaboratives want to retain copyright over certain images and photographs, do not want to share them. So those are some of the sort of sticky situations that can arise. But again, all of this can be resolved if there is a willingness, if there is a candid discussion, and if there are clear areas of agreement on how the collaborative is going to proceed forward. So we always advise them to create a memorandum of understanding, which is a document that has no legal power, but it certainly puts down on paper what everybody is adhering to, what everybody will accept. And if you don't want to be there, nobody's putting a gun to your head. And we've had participants in a collaborative that were not there for the first round, but when they saw the collaborative succeed, they changed their mind.
Thank you. So another one here is, what common mistakes cause community-engaged journalism collaborations to lose trust or momentum? And you kind of named some of them from the other side, but I'm curious what comes up when asked specifically about the mistakes.
Yeah, Liza, I can start this one off because, what I was thinking with the last question, something that I tell a lot of collaboratives is that, problem solving is a muscle, right? It's not like, it's not some kind of like checklist kind of thing. It's something that you have to learn how to do, and then you have to practice, right? So solving tensions or solving problems in these collaboratives is something you have to sort of practice doing over time. So I think definitely one mistake that we do sometimes see folks make is not wanting to build that muscle, right? Or not wanting to practice that, or not wanting to learn from difficult discussions that they have early on. So that one might sound like a bit high level, but it's an important one, I think, because people are going to disagree, right? When they come together, it's okay. The way that you solve it, right, and the way that you disagree with each other is sometimes just as important, if not more important, than what you're actually disagreeing about. So that's definitely one that we see. Liza mentioned the trust issues. I think I don't know if I would say it's a mistake, but definitely we've seen groups sort of let issues fester. We've seen folks, not address questions or anxieties that they have head on, and then people aren't really sure why things are so tense. And then someone finally says, well, I've actually been uncomfortable about this thing for months, and then you're sort of backtracking on, right, when did this start? So that's sort of not addressing things when they happen. That is definitely a mistake that we sometimes see folks make. I would also say I was in a again, I'm not going to identify the collaborative, but I was in a discussion recently where the collaborative was talking about conflicts of interest and writing up a conflicts of interest policy, which they felt was really important. And and someone mentioned that the way that you deal with conflicts is by naming them. Right. So, which sounds kind of, once you say it out loud, it sounds really obvious, but it was such a good reminder in that moment, right? That that is the way to address conflicts. That is the way you have to address tensions, right? Is by naming them. let
And
Liza take
really
over.
quickly, that's within the collaborative. Now, the collaborative vis-a-vis the public, and its relationship with its audiences. Let's face it, the lack of trust and the erosion of trust and confidence of audiences in media precedes the creation of collaboratives. And we have done this to ourselves. I've been a journalist, as you mentioned, Jack, for over 3 decades. I've worked for the majors that don't exist anymore. Tribune, Night Reader, and I could see how we really ceded terrain instead of engaging with the community, how there was a slow retrenchment on most legacy newsrooms instead of occupying the space they should have occupied as an active interlocutor with the community and really paying attention to the community. So the collaborative should be mindful of that and actively continue to engage with the community, with its journalism in its various forms, through straight journalism or through plays or through songs. But that is absolutely key. Transparency and continuous contact and conversation, as Delaney was saying. Air it out. Don't let it fester.
Well, thank you both so much. Really appreciate the answers to those questions. That's really helpful. I am gonna just close this out here unless anybody else pops more questions in the last minute. And just really want to thank you both, Delaney and Liza. This is the third in our first series on building narrative infrastructure. And we do hope that people will be interested in joining us again. Towards late August and September, we're gonna have another series of 3 come out. And just you can watch our socials to find out when that'll be exactly. We're putting together the production schedule right now. And it'll continue along some of these themes with some more experts and more community voices that bring us in some really interesting directions. And again, thank you everyone for being here, and especially, of course, to our presenters, Delaney Butler and Liza Gross. Just really appreciate your all's time and energy. And if folks want to reach out to us, you can do so on socials, or if you happen to have our email, you can message us on LinkedIn. That's great. So thanks again, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.